was 25 years old, and he had been running this reactor alone for exactly 2 months. It is just past midnight. He makes one small mistake, the kind any new engineer might make. His supervisor, standing behind him, orders him to fix it immediately, no matter what the instruments are warning him. 90 seconds later, the building around him no longer exists. His name was Leonid Toptunov, and before the sun rose that morning, he had absorbed a dose of radiation that would kill him within 3 weeks.
This is the true story of what happened inside reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant on the night of April 26, 1986. The Chernobyl plant sat roughly 60 miles north of Kyiv in Soviet Ukraine, beside a purpose-built town called Pripyat, home to roughly 49,000 people, almost all of them plant workers and their families. Pripyat had an average resident age of just 26. It had 15 schools and kindergartens, dozens of sports facilities, a hospital, and a cultural palace with a cinema. It was, by Soviet standards, a showcase city, proof that nuclear power could build a comfortable, modern future. On the night of April 25th into April 26th, plant engineers were preparing to run a safety test on reactor number 4. The test was meant to check something genuinely important. If the plant lost external power, could the spinning momentum of the turbine alone generate enough electricity to run the emergency cooling pumps until backup generators kicked in? It was a test that should have been completed months earlier, under controlled daytime conditions, by an experienced team. Instead, due to a delay requested by the regional power grid controller, it ended up being run after midnight by the night shift, a less experienced crew, working at an hour when the human body's reaction time and judgment are naturally at their weakest. In charge of the test was Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov, an experienced, demanding supervisor known for his short temper. At the reactor controls sat Leonid Toptunov, the senior reactor control engineer, 25 years old, who had only been working independently in this role for about 2 months. Shift supervisor Alexander Akimov stood nearby, ultimately responsible for the unit. As the team worked to lower the reactor's power to the level needed for the test, something went wrong. Due to a combination of operator action and a reaction byproduct called xenon-135 building up inside the core, the reactor's power suddenly collapsed, dropping to nearly zero, far below safe operating levels.
This was the moment that mattered most. Standard safety procedure was clear. If the reactor falls into this kind of unstable, near-shutdown state, the test should be aborted, and the reactor should be properly shut down and left to recover for at least a day. Toptunov wanted to stop. Akimov, his supervisor, also leaned toward stopping. But Dyatlov refused. According to multiple later accounts, Dyatlov insisted the test continue regardless of the schedule, and pressured Toptunov to pull the reactor's power back up by withdrawing the control rods that regulate the nuclear reaction, far more of them than safety rules allowed.
Toptunov objected. He understood the danger. Dyatlov overruled him anyway, reportedly threatening to replace him on the spot if he refused. Toptunov complied. He pulled the rods. Power crept back up to roughly 200 megawatts, still far below the level the test plan actually called for, but enough in Dyatlov's judgment to proceed.
What none of them fully understood, because the design flaw had never been disclosed to plant operators, was that the RBMK reactor at the heart of Chernobyl had a fatal flaw in this specific unstable condition. Under certain circumstances,
The very safety mechanism designed to shut the reactor down could, for a few fatal seconds, cause its power to spike instead. At 1:23 and 4 seconds in the morning, the test itself began.
The cooling pumps that were running off the turbine's coasting momentum started slowing the water flow into the reactor, exactly as the test intended to measure. Inside the unstable reactor core, this triggered a chain reaction of rapidly building steam. At 1:23 and 40 seconds, Akimov pressed the AZ5 button, the emergency shutdown switch, designed to instantly insert every control rod and stop the reaction immediately. It was supposed to be the safest button in the entire control room. Because of the reactor's hidden design flaw, in this exact unstable state, it did the opposite. The control rods, as they began to insert, briefly displaced cooling water and caused a localized power surge instead of a shutdown. Within seconds, reactor power spiked to roughly 100 times its normal maximum output. Fuel rods shattered. A massive steam explosion tore through the reactor core. Seconds later, a second explosion, likely caused by hydrogen gas, blew the 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid clean off the top of the reactor. The roof of the reactor hull was gone. Radioactive graphite and fuel fragments were hurled into the night sky, landing on the roof of the neighboring reactor and scattered across the plant grounds.
In the control room, the lights flickered, alarms screamed, and the building shook. Someone shouted that the reactor had exploded. Dyatlov did not believe it. Reactors, in the world he had spent his career in, simply did not explode. He insisted what they were seeing was a ruptured water tank, not a destroyed reactor, and gave orders, based on that belief, to keep pumping water into a core that effectively no longer existed.
Operators were sent out into areas with radiation readings literally off the scale of their dosimeters, searching for a missing colleague and trying to manually open valves, wearing no real protective equipment, because no one in command yet understood what they were truly walking into. Akimov and Toptunov stayed at their posts for hours, still believing, or desperately hoping, that the reactor itself was intact and could be cooled. It could not. By the time both men were finally evacuated, they had absorbed fatal doses of radiation. Toptunov died on May 14, 1986. He was 25 years old. Akimov died 3 days earlier, on May 11th. Before he died, he reportedly said, "We did everything correctly. I don't understand why it happened." In the town of Pripyat, just 2 kilometers away, residents woke up on the morning of April 26th to a beautiful spring Saturday, completely unaware of what had happened in the night. Children played outside. Families walked to weddings already planned for that day. No public warning was issued for nearly 36 hours. Pripyat was finally evacuated on the afternoon of April 27th. Residents told, falsely, that they would be returning home in a few days and should leave most of their belongings behind. They never returned. Within weeks, the entire region within 30 kilometers of the plant, an area now known as the exclusion zone, was permanently emptied of more than 300,000 people. Soviet authorities, true to a culture built on secrecy, initially tried to hide what had happened, even from much of their own government. It was Swedish radiation monitors detecting unexplained fallout drifting across their own country 2 days later who first forced the truth into the open. More than 500,000 people, soldiers, miners, firefighters, engineers, and ordinary citizens, later known as liquidators, were eventually mobilized to contain the disaster, many absorbing dangerous radiation doses in the process.
Today, Chernobyl remains rated at the maximum level on the International Nuclear Event Scale, alongside only one other disaster in history. Its total cost has been estimated at roughly $700 billion. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev would later say that Chernobyl, more than any of his political reforms, may have been the true beginning of the end for the Soviet Union itself, exposing, in one catastrophic night, exactly how deep the cracks in the system really went. Within 5 years, the Soviet Union had collapsed entirely.
Today, in 2026, the disaster marks its 40th anniversary. The exclusion zone, once feared as poisoned and lifeless, has become an unexpected wildlife refuge. Wolves, lynx, and wild horses now roam streets where children once played. And the danger has not entirely passed. In recent years, the ongoing war in Ukraine has placed the damaged plant directly in a conflict zone once again, with a drone strike in 2024 seriously damaging the protective shelter built to contain what remains of the reactor.
Leonid Toptunov was 25 years old. He made one small error on an ordinary night shift, was overruled by the man in charge of his safety, and pressed a button designed to save the reactor that instead, through no fault of his own, helped destroy it. He and the colleagues beside him paid for a flawed design and a culture of silence with their own lives. And the world has been studying that night and its warnings for 40 years since.